Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Democratic View. And I am your hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I am, a long-time, 10-year resident of East Hampton, and we present a lot of people from our town and talk about what their issues are. Today, I have a fellow Bronxite, David Weinstein. He's here with us today, and he's going to tell us, first of all, a lot about who he is. So tell me where you were born and raised. I know you're from the Bronx.
That's true. I'm from the Bronx. I was born and raised in the Marshallou Parkway section of the Bronx, not far from DeWitt Clinton High School, which I attended.
And Loewy's Paradise.
And the Loewy's Paradise is where I was graduated from.
Me too.
As a graduate of DeWitt Clinton High School. I used to walk from PS 80, which was on Marshallou Parkway, and I lived near there, to DeWitt Clinton High School, which was near Jerome Avenue, the elevated train, that actually, if you got on it, within about 15 minutes, you were at Yankee Stadium. And as you passed Yankee Stadium, you could see the game in progress, if there was one, from the train for just an instant, after which you descended down into the dark tunnel of the subway system, yeah. So that's, of course, a long time ago. I was born in 1938. I'll be 75 next April. And I grew up in the Bronx in the 40s and 50s, a very different world than the one that we have today.
I know it well because I did too, and I will tell you it was a very different world. I remember where my cousin, who I hung out with, lived about maybe 4 or 5 blocks from where I lived. And I can remember coming home from our house at 11 o'clock at night when I was a teenager on the street by myself.
That's right.
I don't think anybody does that in the Bronx anymore.
That's a sad part of youth in our country today, whether it's the city or the suburbs even. As children, we played on the street. Our mothers had to go and find us
right.
After dark even, and it was still safe.
That's right. Ringalivio Coca-Cola.
Ringalivio.
Flies are up.
My favorite sport, however, was roller hockey. And this is well before the roller hockey boots or the single skates, single track boots that they have now. These were 4 metal wheels with a metal clip that went around the top of your shoe. And it was many a night that I would come home with bruised knees from playing hockey in the street. We used the sewer covers as the goals, and they were probably 150 feet apart. And then, of course, there was stickball in the schoolyard, and handball,
high water,
and
low
punch
water,
ball, and Ringalivio, as you said. Yeah, it was a wonderful, wonderful childhood.
Yes, it was. We played on the street all day, all weekend, and what you call roller hockey, I called roller skating, and I did it. And I will tell you someday a story about the injury I got from that, which resulted in a fake knee.
Wow.
But I was ADD, and running around the streets like a crazy person.
Yeah.
My mother used to have to pull me up from Zuriger Avenue.
So we didn't have the kinds of possessions that children have today by any stretch of the imagination. I know my grandchildren probably have 200 times the number of items, of things, of toys, of objects, and
Right.
That I did. But thinking back to those years and to how our country is today, it was in those years that many strong, good people were produced that went on to make their way in the world and lead this country to become the great country that it did and that it is and was, with public education, right through
A
college.
very fine public education. I coasted on my public education, my high school education, for my first 3 years of college. You know, I never opened a book because I had such great teachers in Christopher Columbus High School. And so what happened to you after high school?
Well, I went to Hunter College, which was also in the Bronx, and at that time it was a co-ed school uptown and affiliated with the downtown Hunter College. It wasn't that far from DeWitt Clinton High School, actually. It was like an Ivy League school, though, because there were 4 limestone buildings that were covered with ivy. There were red clay tennis courts. It was a wonderful, wonderful facility.
It's actually hard to get into Hunter, believe it or
Well,
not.
I don't know that it was very, very hard. I wasn't a brilliant student, but I was good enough to get into the college. And it was difficult. It was a lot of work, but it was wonderful. The English department was excellent. The science department. Some of my favorite courses were physiology and English, of course, and algebra and calculus and chemistry and all of those, and physiology, if I didn't mention that, it was great. My father was a frustrated lawyer. So although I wanted to be a doctor, and Hunter College was not exactly the place to get into medical school, which has always been competitive and was very competitive at that time. And so he convinced me to become a lawyer, and that's what I did. And I went to Brooklyn Law School, which I entered actually at age 20. And I worked for my father in a business that he had. He was a school teacher. And he had a small business after school, which was taking pictures, excuse me, of the scenes of accidents, which he would be asked to do by lawyers. And so I would go to Brooklyn Law School I drove myself in a Volkswagen Beetle that I owned at that time, and take my classes in the morning, and then I would spend the next 6 to 7 hours, afternoon into the early evening, taking photographs of people who were injured in tenement buildings and on the streets and auto accidents and so on.
You know what most people don't realize about school teachers, and of course I am a retired school teacher and school administrator, is that many people, particularly men who had families, and women if they were the sole support of their family, always had little businesses. I can think of many of my high school teachers who had a business. It was either a camp or something like that that they did to support themselves
And
throughout.
supplement their income, because teachers
Yes.
are reasonably well paid now, not as well as in the business world. However, when my father was a teacher, the pay was not so very good at all. And so he really needed to work a business. And I think our monthly rent in a 2-family house that we lived in was like $60 a month, if you could imagine that. Yeah. So that work, however, gave me an experience as a very young man about what the world was like in a way that I never would have been able to see had I not done that work. And what I'm talking about is that, unfortunately, a lot of the work that we did was in the ghetto areas of the city, meaning the Bronx, Manhattan, and Brooklyn. And I went into the ghetto with my camera and into the apartments of very, very, very poor people. And I saw how people lived, crowded into small spaces, and with very little furniture and very little possessions. And you could just see and feel the poverty. And that, together with the ethos that I learned in my childhood, growing up with my parents, has lived with me to this day in terms of an understanding and a sympathy and an empathy for people who have less. And there's always been a large segment of poor people in our country, and now, with the economic crisis that we've suffered, there are many, many, many people who are suffering. And so I carry that with me. I've had the good fortune to have an education and to make my way in the world and in New York City, where I worked for a couple of law firms when I was graduated from law school at age 23, by the way. And then when I was 29, I formed my own law firm and built a small law firm with a partner and a junior partner and some associates. but I have never, notwithstanding my having earned a good living and acquired some modicum of security and a good standard of living all through my life, forgotten how so many people live.
And so many of those people, I mean, we're talking about the late 40s, early 50s era when the programs that were started by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the great heroes of our country, who gave us Social Security.
Right.
Some of those programs were just getting into effect, so that if you were older, you did get, were able to get a little something to carry you through, so that you could at least have rent and food.
And food on your table.
And food on your table.
Right.
And then as we came into the 60s, we were able to get, under the programs that began with President Kennedy and were carried out by Lyndon Johnson, we were able to get some other social safety nets that have helped the poor people all the way along.
That's true.
And those are very, very important parts of our nation. You know, the food stamp program and
That's true, Phyllis, and sadly, those programs are now under serious attack and are threatened. And I have to say that I know many people who are financially comfortable, as I am, and many of them remember their roots and care for people who have less. But what puzzles me is in this day and age is that there are so many very wealthy people who came from modest beginnings, who have turned away from the poor, and who somehow are resentful of the very programs that take care of the poor and that probably took care of their own families when they were younger. And now that they have a great deal of wealth, they're almost angry at people who need assistance. I don't understand that. I don't understand how people who benefited from the public education system that we have, and including the college public education system, can turn their backs on those who have less now. It's a puzzlement to me.
I think it's something that is, has many of us quite bewildered, and I certainly am among those people, although I tend to believe that these are people who are scared. I think that's what fear, I think that's what's been driving that whole very, very right-wing Tea Party type of people to be so angry and so against those who are in need of help.
Right. I agree with you that people in the Tea Party and who are of that political persuasion very often are coming from a place of fear that perhaps what they have will be taken away from them. However, there are also multi-millionaires who are backing these conservative proposals, as we can see in the current election. And it's those people who have so much that they cannot be coming from fear. I'm sorry to say they're coming from greed.
They're coming from greed and avarice.
Yeah,
yes.
and that has no place.
Two of the seven deadly sins.
Yeah, and so I think it's undermining our strong country, because without a strong middle class, without the opportunity for lower and middle class people to be educated when they have the ability to achieve in education, we're going to lose out in the race among the rest of the world. We know the Chinese are producing scientists at a much greater rate than we are now. Even in India, that's the case. So this very concern about public systems that will enable those who cannot afford education to get education is threatening all of us, including the rich, because the rich get rich when our economy is humming, and when it's not, they don't. One of the things that Congressman Bishop has been in favor of are something called Pell Grants. And Pell Grants
I educated 4 children as a single parent
Yeah.
on Pell Grants.
So do you know that right here, and I'm looking at some notes about this, Stony Brook students received $26.4 million in Pell Grants, and students at Suffolk Community College received $28.9 million. The Republicans in Congress, the conservative Republicans, want to abolish Pell Grants, which takes away the ability of people who can't afford to pay for college, the ability to go to college. It makes no sense. It's going to ruin our country if we don't educate the middle class and lower class people who cannot afford.
And some of those people are not only are, you know, after all, intelligence and talent and innovation, the ability to innovate are not just something that the rich, that is subject to only the rich. I mean, those children who need that, as an educator who has worked in Yonkers Public Schools, which is a very, very predominantly multicultural, student population, I can tell you that I have seen some of the brightest, most gifted people, as I did in Lily White Rippewam-Siskwa, which was a private school in Bedford Village, where I had children whose fathers didn't even work. They just lived off their coupons that they clipped. And I can tell you that I had children in the Black and Hispanic and Asian and lower middle class white people in those districts, in my district in Yonkers, as were just as talented, as talented and just as gifted. And
that's what has made our country great, when everyone who is able and capable of getting through college and post-college work has the opportunity to do so.
And everybody needs some post-high school work nowadays,
Certainly.
just to be able to even understand the world.
Right. Even in, like, if it's not college, it's community college is a college, which creates the ability to have skills that are needed in our country. And as a matter of fact, I think there are between 5 and 10 million jobs now that are going unfilled for lack of qualified people. So, we Democrats are concerned about the possibility that so many programs that benefit people who have limited means are under attack. And even the health care law, which will provide for the coverage of 39 million people who don't have health insurance, is under attack. And frankly, Congressman Bishop has supported that, is in favor of it. And Mr. Altshuler has said that if he's elected, he will vote to repeal the health care law. So that is, you're talking about 39 million people. And when people don't have health care, it affects the very thing we're talking about, their ability to function in the world and be productive. And of course, the health care bill goes beyond that in terms of covering people, guaranteeing that whether, if you have a prior existing condition, the insurance company will not be able to decline covering you. It's very important. If people are sick and can't get health care, and it affects their whole family and their ability to be productive in the world. Likewise, the health care bill provides that no matter how much money is required in a year or in a lifetime to cover an illness, it's called catastrophic illness, the person will be covered without any limitation. So these things are vital to the strength of our nation. And of course, the conservative Republican Congress, which didn't go along with the health care bill and was passed only by Democrats, none of them would vote for it, would seek to repeal it.
Well, of the 435 representatives in the House of Representatives right now, our race right here with Tim Bishop against this interloper, this guy from New Jersey, that race is ranked 33rd as being the amount of money spent, because Altshuler has outspent Bishop by 3-1, and most of that is money that comes from outside our own county.
That's correct.
That people don't even know about
Yeah.
where this money is coming from.
I understand the Republicans targeted about a dozen congressional seats across the nation where the last election was very close, in the hope that this time round they could defeat the incumbent Democratic congressperson. That's true, yeah. And you know, Mr. Altshuler has said he has a 10-point plan that will get jobs to Long Island, but he doesn't say what they are.
Well, isn't that the same thing that Romney has done? He's going
Exactly.
to create 12 million jobs, but doesn't tell us how he's going to create or when he's going. I mean, if he has any secret, he should let us all know right now.
Right.
So that we can start this job creation. But, you know, this is what we're up against in this election, and it's become a very bitter one. I mean, when you're talking about somebody who is outspending our own representative, our own congressman, 3-1, you know, that's an enormous amount of money.
Right. And unfortunately, some of these advertisements, which are defaming our congressman and accusing him of taking some kind of an illegal contribution, are just not founded in fact.
No, they are not. And then the East Hampton Press, as well as the East Hampton Star, have both come out. And the East Hampton Press actually said that anyone who reads Molly Bishop's letter to the email that she sent to the man who wanted to make a contribution, there's no way. You would be hard-pressed, and I'm quoting it on that, the word hard-pressed, to interpret that as a solicitation of funds. What she was doing was clarifying the funds. You know, if you give at certain time, it's that you can give this much. If you give later on, you can give so much.
And it's my understanding that Congressman Bishop, by the way, has a reputation based on fact for helping constituents in many ways. A few nights ago, I was making some telephone calls on his behalf, and I happened to speak to a gentleman who happened to be a Republican. And he said to me, I'm voting for Congressman Bishop because he helped me to get some student aid when I was at Southampton College. So he has a great reputation for helping people. And in fact, this gentleman who made the contribution needed some help in connection with some permit he was seeking. And that help began long before, I think it was 5 weeks before Molly Bishop, as you say, sent an email clarifying how he could make a contribution. And that only came about because he expressed the desire to do so. It wasn't a situation where the congressman and his office said, if you make a contribution to us, we will help you. That is not the way it happened.
Well, that's the way Altshuler and his campaign manager have really done a tremendous job of trying to make it look that way.
Yeah.
But obviously, that's not true because no charges were ever really brought before the Congress.
Right. He's been our congressman now for 10 years, I believe.
Born and raised here, and I have interviewed him many times, and I can tell you, he can tell you stories about the potato farm that his family had in Sagaponack, and how he would, in the summertime, be out there at 6 o'clock in the morning picking the potatoes, and from this family farm, he could see straight down to the ocean,
Right.
and he thought he was the luckiest guy in the world to be out there doing that at that time.
Yeah.
So he is a man from our district. He knows our needs.
Yeah. And he's passed legislation around fishing. He's
Yes.
helped veterans with legislation for veterans benefits.
Veterans love him.
And yes, that's right. So he's a very caring person. And we have, unfortunately, had this terrible financial crisis, which came about because of abuses by big business, and Wall Street in particular, in the mortgage situation with extending credit to people who couldn't afford to pay their mortgages. And what people need to understand, my heart goes out to people who are suffering and having a hard time making ends meet and having their mortgages in default and so on. But what people need to know is that when there's a financial crisis, it results from a burst in the credit bubble. People were borrowing, businesses were borrowing, and by 2008, that bubble burst. And when people get into that situation, they have no money to spend into the economy. And that's why it takes a long, long time for the economy to recover.
You know, I like to always point out that the crash that occurred in 1929, which began the Great Depression,
Yes.
which we almost had, and it took us until 1941, the beginning of World War II.
Right.
And that's a long time. We're talking about 12 years of intense bad times.
Right. And frankly, President Obama and the Democrat Congress that supported him in the passage of the stimulus package saved our country from another Great Depression. And in fact, when people are saying, well, it hasn't worked, it has worked. I think 3.8 million jobs have been created in the last 3 years. We were losing 750,000 to 1 million jobs a month during 2008 when this crisis struck into 2009. So, in fact, President Obama has done the right thing for us, and we need to understand that it takes time. And in fact, because people can't spend money, the government has to spend money. And so, yes, we've had an increase in the deficit, but it's for the purpose of getting the economy primed. And it will be primed, and it is starting to show. Even today, the growth rate was beyond what was expected.
Yes, we are definitely, beginning to crawl out of that Great Recession. And I think we also need to remember that if we go back to the same kind of policies which Mitt Romney is talking about, that are the policies of the Bush administration that got us into this problem.
Right.
I remember Bill Clinton saying it, why would you want to rehire the guys who got you where you are at the bottom of this hole? Thank you, David. I appreciate you coming on.
You're quite welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, goes fast, doesn't it?
Yes.
Especially when you got a lot to do.